Schumpeter.
Thanks.
When we run the exercise on Mercedes-Benz, it's very, very competitive. It's incredibly competitive. And normally it's just two people we have. And they often end up fighting really badly. When we started getting a bit of dispute going on, that's nothing compared to the way it happens. So when I do it in Mercedes-Benz, I only allow cash transactions only, because truly these guys, they will fight. What's wrong with that, what that photograph represents? What's wrong with that photograph? This is the cream of the Mercedes-Benz UK team. What's wrong with it? Shout out. Too much unity. Explain. Yes?
Yeah, it looks like they are one team, and it does look as if they would be so competitive.
Yep.
As you
There's also, I mean, not much diversity by means of culture and gender.
Yep. Yep. No, lack of diversity, lack of culture. They're all white, mostly all men, and that would be a dreadful team. I would not want to have them guys working for me, because they'd fight with me all the time, and they would fight with each other all the time. They wouldn't get on with the job. And, they all look the same. Maybe because they have to wear the same sort of suit, the same sort of outfit. When I'm teaching at this particular module, every now and then I come in wearing my holiday clothes, which is Bermuda shorts and a really loud shirt. And they fall off their chairs. They don't understand why a teacher at a university like St Andrews comes in so out of character. They expect them all to look like that. There's a lot of problems with that. And I'll talk about Volkswagen in a minute, because that's the same sort of things. So well done everybody who took part in the exercise. It's hard work. I hope you learned something. Now, the characteristics of entrepreneurs, what you guys showed was how fast you learned. People who stood up learned it very fast. They figured out the exercise off that card. I gave them no advance warning, and I gave them almost no instructions. Just that they had to read the card and put it down and get on with it. So well done, they scored highly on that. Socially intelligent, they knew who to talk to. They knew which of you guys looked like you'd be a willing follower. They were also competitive. They wanted to get on with it. They wanted to win, and they were certainly edging each other on. Self-efficacy is an unusual word. Has anyone come across this word efficacy before? You know what it means? It's not a very common word. Has anyone done fire walking, where you walk across a fire? You know what it is? You've seen the people, they get their hot coals, and then they walk across the hot coals with their feet. That's the belief you can do that is efficacy. So the belief you can do something, you believe it, and you can do it, is called self-efficacy. You believe in yourself, therefore you can do it. So whenever you go into an oral presentation situation, where you've got to stand up in one of the big lecture theatres in a few years' time and give a lecture to 2,000 people, if you believe you can do it, you can do it. In entrepreneurial language, you bullshit until you win. You just keep bullshitting until you get there. They also take risks. Entrepreneurs take risks. The optimists, they could have all gone full flat in their faces. They could have all made a mess of that little exercise. They were taking a risk to get up. I, as an entrepreneur, managed my risk by getting these guys to be my intermediaries. And Professor Schumpeter, the major intellectual who wrote about entrepreneurship, he's my kind of intellectual hero, he said entrepreneurs don't take risks. What he meant was they don't bear risk. They'll take risk on behalf of other people. So right now the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley are piling money into entrepreneurial ventures, just like in the dot-com bubble. They're putting enormous amounts of money into ventures that are called unicorns. And the valuation is $1 billion. They're called a unicorn. And the people that are working in these entrepreneurial outfits are not themselves taking any risk. The venture capitalists are taking risk. So the ability to talk a good tale to the venture capitalists is really important. This was my example of investing. Investing in an uncertain outcome, but I don't care whether it's Rosberg or Vettel who wins, as long as I get 50% of the winnings. And the rest of you guys, I'm sorry, you've lost. And that's how the venture capital market works. Venture capitalists are taking bets. Question for you, would you bet on the car or the driver? Which is more important, the car or the driver? The car. Okay. Anyone think different? Car or driver? Driver, okay.
I'd say the mixture.
Mixture. Okay, so you want to sit on the fence, that's okay.
No, I mean, it's like, if the car is designed by Ross Brawn, you'd say, okay, the car, but, I mean, a good driver in a bad car.
I mean, all these Formula One cars are built to the same specification, they're all basically the same car, they've got tiny little tweaks under the bonnet, but they're all designed to do the same thing. They've all got the same horsepower, they've all got the same fuel. Car or driver?
It's a little bit like the leader in the company.
Leader in the company, yeah.
If the leader has to inspire people and to bring them in line to achieve one goal. So this is basically what the driver is doing with the car.
So if I was driving a Mercedes car, I wouldn't win, definitely. And I guess if anyone else, Lewis Hamilton, when they talk about recruiting people, you recruit for attitude, you recruit for the can-do spirit, you recruit for self-efficacy, you train the skills. So if you're trying to recruit anybody, or if you're thinking of being recruited, it doesn't matter if you can't do something, you've just got to be able to tackle them with bullshit until they believe you can do it, and then you learn it on the job. So definitely, it's always a driver. We also do sometimes talk about horse racing. You bet on the horse or the jockey, and it's always the person, it's always the jockey. There's a dark side to all this, though. Your leader isn't necessarily always a good person. As an entrepreneur, I'm always wondering what's the worst that can happen to me? Not to you, but to me. What's the worst that can happen to me? And in the real world of business, the worst that can happen is I go to prison. That's a bad thing. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to court, criminal court. I don't mind if I take a few shortcuts. And best of all, if I can persuade somebody else to take all the risk, and I just get to spend the money, that's a great place to be. But it is very stressful. And the other thing is, entrepreneurs sometimes are very bullying. They sometimes say, shut up, really hard, because they're trying to put their will across. Okay, don't worry. Well, it wasn't intended to be personal, it's a good opportunity. So don't trust people. Entrepreneurs really don't trust people because they know just how devious and how many lies they can tell themselves. They've also got a distorted view of reality. Now, I'm going to play a little audio clip in a minute which talks about Steve Jobs. He's said to have had a reality distortion field. He could make people follow him and they would walk through the fire pit. They would walk across burning coals, they'd follow him to the ends of the earth. And even if you knew he was telling you something that wasn't true, you'd still follow him. I never met Steve Jobs. I did a lot of work with Apple. I saw him across a canteen once. but I have seen the effect of how on people. So there's a distorted view of reality, and finally there's this idea of hubris, where the bankers became so convinced they were God that they could do no wrong, and they racked up billions and billions of dollars worth and euros worth of debt. Volkswagen, you're all familiar with the Volkswagen story. This is the American head of Volkswagen USA, and in his testimony to the Senate, or to the congressional hearings, he blamed a few rogue engineers. And for my students in St Andrews next semester, we're going to study this case in a lot of detail. We're going to really pull it apart and decide, would you have done the same? If you were faced with a situation of knowing how to defeat the test, would you have done the same? Most entrepreneurs would. That's a good example of entrepreneurial behavior. Not ethical, it's not morally correct, but most entrepreneurs will take the risk. Because the worst that can happen is that somebody else goes to jail. As an investor in Volkswagen, I'm going to suffer. But I would like to see some of these top executives go to jail themselves. So this next is a little audio clip. It's about 3 or 4 minutes. And it's taken from the biography of Steve Jobs by Isaacson. And it's coming out of the book, chapter 11, that's the reference. If you want to read it again, it's worth listening to. Listen to it quietly, and I'll maybe play it a second time. It's about how Steve Jobs distorts reality. It should work.
Chapter 11, the reality distortion field. The best way to describe the situation is a term from Star Trek, Tribble explained. Steve has a reality distortion field. When Hertzfeld looked puzzled, Tribble elaborated. In his presence, reality is malleable. He can convince anyone of practically anything. It wears off when he's not around, but it makes it hard to have realistic schedules. It was dangerous to get caught in Steve's distortion field, but it was what led him to actually be able to change reality. At first, Hertzfeld thought that Tribble was exaggerating, but after 2 weeks of working with Jobs, he became a keen observer of the phenomenon. The reality distortion field was a confounding melange of charismatic rhetorical style, indomitable will, and eagerness to bend any fact to fit the purpose at hand, he said. There was little that could shield you from the force, Hertzfeld discovered. Amazingly, the reality distortion field seemed to be effective even if you were acutely aware of it. To some people, calling it a reality distortion field was just a clever way to say that Jobs tended to lie. But it was, in fact, a more complex form of dissembling. He would assert something, be it a fact about world history or a recounting of who suggested an idea at a meeting, without even considering the truth. It came from willfully defying reality, not only to others, but to himself. He can deceive himself, said Bill Atkinson. It allowed him to con people into believing his vision, because he has personally embraced and internalized it.
So, he conned people, it says, he conned people into believing his vision. So entrepreneurs have got to be able to tell stories, and they've got to make the story both believable and convey it in a way that the person wants to believe it. It's very hard to explain and describe in theory terms. There is an emerging body of literature, academic literature just now, that talks about the stories and the storytelling of entrepreneurship. In a corporate situation, you can have an entrepreneur within a corporation who can acquire power, who can acquire leaders, followers, who can assume a position of leadership while gathering as much resources themselves. And they do it through storytelling. And it's the same entrepreneurial story. So the acquisition of power and followers is where entrepreneurship and leadership come together. So you need to acquire resources and you need to acquire followers, which you do through storytelling. And the impolite word is you bullshit. You just got to tell a story to get the resources you need. Leaders become cultural operators. They determine the culture of the organization. So the Mercedes-Benz culture is white, middle-aged men wearing suits with a dark tie and a white shirt, typically. And if you disrupt that culture, if something disrupts the culture, then it's very powerful. So if you can get into a position of power and then disrupt the culture, you've got a very powerful position. How the current activities can lead to future benefits. You guys are here, you're studying as students, you've got an idea of some benefit coming out of this particular module, this course, this degree, this university. And the story that you bought into is what the leader, whoever it was, Harry in this case has recruited you to the module, the leader has given you a story which you willingly bought into. So at the best, entrepreneurs develop some social relationships with people who've got money and resources. If I'm an entrepreneur, my best pal is the guy who's got the resources that I want. I don't want to use any of my resources, I want to use her resources. Because her budget is better than my budget. I'll keep my budget for spending on fun things, I'll use her budget for something else. So you make a story of why your project is so important, how it's going to deliver benefits to the external stakeholders, and you win the resources. But this is a big problem. Sometimes the leadership, the entrepreneurial leadership, becomes manipulative. Once I can do it for a good purpose, I can also do it for a bad purpose. And sometimes I can become completely blind to the reality of the situation. And this is where the bankers went wrong. In the 2007-2008 financial crisis, the top bankers, the Fred Goodwin, for example, of the Royal Bank of Scotland, the RBS group, he was a complete megalomaniac. He was out of touch with reality. He had no idea the impact he was having on the business, or the impact that the business was having on the wider economy. So there's a lot of new material coming out of that. And if any of you think you're doing a PhD in a new field, there's a lot of stuff there. That's it. Thank you. You can ask questions.
So, thank you very much once again for this really insightful and with big practice experience brought given lecture, and I was really impressed, really. So, we are open now the discussion. Please, questions. I have one question. For me, it's very interesting to have an ex post side about the dark side of entrepreneurial leadership. Another field what is very interesting for me is the ex ante side. And the question is, how can we identify the dark side or toxic leadership with entrepreneurial leadership? How can we identify some key toxic skills to have an idea to solve a problem? So maybe the storyteller in this case.
You have to challenge the storyteller. You have to, very hard is the answer, but I think critical thinking, the skill of critical thinking, which is something that we value enormously, I'm sure you do here, in the higher education system, the ability to tell the person they're wrong and they're ripping something off without getting fired. The key is don't get fired. Don't become part of the problem. That's very hard. What would you guys have done if you'd been a middle manager in Volkswagen and you knew the deal about these emissions tests? Would you have made a fuss?
numbers. You can, because if they just figured out it's not able, well, you're not able to make it, or not just Volkswagen, because I mean, it's all very theoretical. It's better to tell the buyers that, look, we're working on it, but it's not manageable yet to do it, so we have a different kind of car, which is statistically doing quite well, but we cannot bring you that kind of
Yes.
emission.
Go back a stage, go back and propose. Why would Volkswagen be in favour of having emissions tests? Would they be in favour of it?
They did quite well until somebody just came up with that. But
So what's the competitive advantage for Volkswagen in a situation with emissions tests?
they would do good at some point.
They would do good in some more because
Of that, yeah, what came out of the emission test.
what I'm trying to go to is a barrier to entry. They're creating a really big barrier to the rubbishy cars from Toyota and from Nissan and from,
The competitor.
you name it, the competitors, yeah. So if they've got this barrier to entry and they've established themselves as the greenest car in the world, they want the highest standards they can get. They want to be seen as, what they say, we made clean diesel at last. And the marketing people got out of sync with the reality of the situation, and they definitely suffered from hubris. If you were the competitors, let's ask over here, if you're the competitors and you know that Volkswagen are rigging the tests, what do you do? If you're Toyota or you're Nissan, what would you do? Vauxhall, General Motors? So you would be waiting for the moment to pull the curtains on Volkswagen and reveal the fact they've been cheating. What about anybody else? What would you do? Try to take an advantage how? Okay. That's after the event.
Check if we're doing the same.
Check if we're doing the same, yes. And,
Yeah, if we're not doing the same, take advantage.
okay,
Yeah, but if you are doing the same, it's a dangerous strategy to reveal cause
but if you're doing it, it's dangerous to shout
look
about it.
at all the
Yeah.
car markets, so that's
So, so let's ask a poll, an instant opinion poll. Let's imagine you guys here are all competitors of Volkswagen, and you all know very well that Volkswagen are rigging the results. Do you think, your hand up if you do you think your company should do the same as Volkswagen? Hi. Basically, this is what they've done. They've decided, most of the competitors have been doing the same thing. They haven't yet been caught. General Motors is about to be caught, but many other people have been doing the same thing. In the Tour de France, there are already cyclists here, people who like following racing, cycle racing, the Tour de France. There was a lot of drug taking amongst all the teams. And when it was all revealed a couple of years ago, that Lance Armstrong had won, but won with drugs in his system, with EPO, with blood, with all sorts of techniques of enhancing his performance, the fellow riders didn't think he was cheating, because they were all doing it. And therefore it was a level playing field. So the fact that you've got a competitive situation where, as long as everybody's competing with the same level of dishonesty, then it's fair. And we've seen this in 2 or 3 situations recently. The Tour de France was one. This motor car scandal is another one. There's 2 or 3 of them coming out, and the literature's just being written up about it. So that's for sure. Sorry, Harry, I tripped you off topic a wee bit there.
Perfect. More questions? I have another question. How can we manage the balance between storytelling on one hand and ethical entrepreneurial leadership?
You have to recruit the right person, you have to deal with the right people. There are good guys out there. My personal philosophy is that people by and large are good. They're genuinely decent, but there are some crooks. And you've just got to avoid the crooks like crazy. That's all I can say. The unethical storytelling, you just got to have critical thinking, challenge, probe, research, get better at it than the other guy. I mean, I don't mind telling you the dark side of entrepreneurship, but for sure, there's times in my business situations where I've taken advantage of the other person's lack of knowledge, lack of information, and that's one of the things that Harry said at the very beginning. Knowing and taking advantage of somebody else's lack of information. That's leveraging an opportunity.
Questions? Okay. Do you see a difference between ethical entrepreneurial leadership of the owner and ethical entrepreneurial leadership in the big companies?
In big companies, the top bosses don't want to know. They want to distance themselves. They want to be able to say to their middle managers, just bring me solutions. There's the rude word I'm trying to keep away from. Just do it. But when you put a rude word in the middle, you get the picture. So if you're the top boss of Volkswagen, you say, just do it. But you put the F word in the middle of the sentence and you shout at the person, just do it. Bring me the solution. I don't want to know the details. So deniable, plausible deniability. In a sense, it's almost like the CIA going in to rescue people from a particular, that sort of situation. Small companies, playing field is much better. You get much more visibility, you get much better peer pressure from within. So the SME area, I think, is probably a lot better.
Any more questions? Okay, if not, then once again, thank you very much, Charles. We have learned today. So, one moment. We have a tradition here in the lecture. Every semester, the class comes in front here and we make a big picture together. Please all, of course, please come all, and then we have a gift for you. It is a joint venture with the Good Finance Association. Please come. We thank also this wonderful case together. Thank you so much. Come here. Take the picture together.